ideas. So we also have a Facebook page. That information is back there. Our next program we have is our plant and seed swap. It's April 18th, and it'll be here. Just like all our programs, it's free for the plant and seed swap. You bring things and you take things. You don't have to bring anything. You can just come and take things. So we'd love to have you there or sign up for our FYI list. Thanks.
Great. I am James. I'm with Underwood Conservation District. I focus a lot on farms, agriculture, habitat, a lot of native plants. So.
James, it might be better to stand over there for that owl. It was working.
Can you just advance on the laptop?
Yeah.
You've got the screen on the laptop.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yeah, so Underwood Conservation District serves Western Pollinators and Wallace Community County. We're a pretty diverse landscape that goes from straddles the east and west of the Cascades. We do have a lot of different programs involving stream habitat, a lot of native plants, urban environments. Agriculture is very diverse from land uses. There's a lot of different programs that we do have. We have a pretty big staff that's still growing. Mia here in the back, she just came on about a week and a half ago as a natural resource specialist, so we're very excited. We do have 2 new positions if anyone knows of anyone looking for a job. It's a wildlife resource specialist and so wildfire resilience specialist and a admin person. A big program that I do run is our food and farm tool library. It's based out of the Stevenson Grange, the lower parking lot, where we have a bunch of different stuff. And it's a really cool program from growing food to preserving food to a lot of different agricultural stuff. Poultry pluckers are usually pretty popular, but there's a lot of really cool aspects inside the city life. Like I said, I do a lot with native plants, and for 2 years now, we've actually had a fall native plant sale. And this last one was a really awesome partnership with Oktoberfest and all the folks up in the historic Wing River. Got to sell a bunch of cool plants, give a bunch of plants away, kind of talk to the community and a lot of partners up there, which is awesome. Some photos from last year with some apple pressing. There's a lot of fun last year. Yep, and a lot of native plants. We do a lot of restoration projects. As you can kind of see here, we do a lot of riparian zones. Water quality is very important in a lot of the work that we do. So riparian buffers are very important, and native plants actually installing back on these zones are highly beneficial for a lot of the ecosystems. Here we hold our annual Tree Fest events, and this year will be on March 21st. Right now, we are doing our native plant sale that we've done for years and years now, and it is online, and we will be doing pre-orders until the end of February. If anyone has any questions, I got some cards in the back, and we can scan them. So, another big program that we do offer is like the mobile chip. It is very popular, and it's a fantastic way to kind of reach people around in neighborhoods, landowners. We will have a lot more information on that here soon, as we are in the process of hiring for this wildfire specialist. So keep an eye out, sign up for our newsletter. It's always great to get our, every other month we'll send out a newsletter. It's got a lot of information on different programs that are coming up. If anyone has any questions, you can ask me, and hopefully I can figure out the best answer or the right person to put you in charge. Yeah. So now lead us into Corey. Like I said, if you have any questions, just talk to me afterwards. It is.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Corey Podolak, and I think it's best if I stand over here for the recording. We are recording so that people that aren't able to be here tonight can watch it at a later time. Side note there. And just wanted to, just go over a few more parts of our program. We did do some help or did some things with we're doing fire recovery and assisted. It was 30 landowners. We helped with trees, handing out trees as well as seeds to help with just recovery of the land and offer chipping as well. So I do a lot of the outreach and education, but also the backyard habitat yard by yard program, which has been going for a little while, but we're always looking for new signups for Roberta's actually somebody that has gotten certified, and it's we've got some flexibility in our certification, and a lot of it's just educating and working together to try to preserve the land, and it's a great way to think about how we can make a difference in our own space. So please reach out if you have questions. We got a little bit more information back there, and I'll be here. So ask me questions if you'd like. Another program we do is crop talks, which is really fun. There were 7 events this last year, and we worked with farmers on both sides of the Columbia and Oregon and Washington. We team up with Gorge Your Own Food Network, and they do the Oregon side and we do the Washington side, and then the farmers get to learn from each other, and we do a potluck and super fun. So that's another program that we do. And then we just turned 85 this year, so kind of a big deal, it feels like. And I will also be introducing our speaker, Aaron, who thank you so much for being here from Portland. So Aaron works with the public and Xerces staff to reduce pesticide use in residential landscapes, including promoting alternative pest control measures and pollinator-friendly gardening practices. Prior to joining Xerces in 2022, he researched pollinator conservation in urban landscapes, restored habitat for several endangered butterfly species, and worked in insect biocontrol. Aaron has a PhD from Oregon State University, and he will be showing us his slides here. All right, so if we can, thank you. We can do this transition quickly. To run through, of course, the mouse is not, there we go. All right, and you go right here. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Let's see. We can get my slides to come up with perfect. Looks good. All right, perfect. Well, thanks so much, Corey, for introducing me, and thank you all for having me and coming to talk about pollinator conservation on a Wednesday night or Wednesday night. As Corey said, my name is Aaron Anderson. I work for the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. We're based in Portland, but we have staff all over the country working to do pollinator and other beneficial insect conservation. Before I begin, I do want to quickly, slight technical issue here, sorry.
Is it letting you advance?
Let's see, I have the slide up. I have the speaker view, so I have my notes, but that seems to not want this. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I think
You're okay.
oh, but now that one's not advancing. That's okay. I can just.
If you use
Will that work? Yes. Wait, but then that one doesn't go. Here, wait. I wonder if I stop sharing and resharing, or is that dangerous?
Maybe just
Yeah. Let's see. Maybe I want to do this. I want to just do the one. Let's see. Share. Okay. Oops. I'm gonna wait. That's okay. Oh, it's okay.
okay, wait.
Okay, now that's advanced. That's okay. Do you know what? We can do that.
Record. Need to put the clicker towards the laptop.
Oh, is that right? Thank you.
It's real common.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're learning as we go. Thank you all.
Wait, but then that's going on this one, but not that one. You know what? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll do this and, I'll wing it. Who needs notes?
Yeah.
If there's anything I really need my notes for, I can look back. Thanks for bearing with me here, everybody. You're totally fine. Okay, make sure. Okay, here we go. We're gonna go back to where we left off here. Okay, so I did want to quickly thank before I started all of our supporters, because without them we couldn't do the work that we do, and their support really is so important. And on that note, we are a donor-supported nonprofit, so if you're at all interested, I encourage you to check out our website today and kind of learn what we do. Yeah, like I said, our donors really make it possible to do all of the outreach and on-the-ground conservation work that we do. So if this is your first talk with us, if you haven't heard of the Xerces Society before, we've been around since 1971, working to protect wildlife through the conservation of invertebrates and their habitat. And our name is a reference to the Xerces blue butterfly, which is believed, unfortunately, to be the first butterfly to go extinct due to human development in the United States, and it used to live in the coastal sand dunes around the San Francisco Bay Area. And we do a lot of on-the-ground conservation work with programs focusing on pollinators, agricultural biodiversity. We do a lot of community engagement work in residential communities, endangered species. We really work in all sorts of areas. So this slide has some of those representative areas. We have people working on freshwater mussels. I don't do anything with that, but I think it's super cool. So I'll put it over there. And I think maybe the most helpful work we do is creating detailed science-based guides for pollinator conservation, other types of invertebrate conservation, endangered species, pollinator plant lists. We have all sorts of great resources that are really decades of work, and they're all free at our Xerces library. So I encourage you to go check those out if you're interested. So I want to give a quick outline of where we're going with this talk, so we're all on the same page. I want to talk a little bit about who our pollinators are, as well as our beneficial insects. Lots of time, pollinators get kind of the main billing and all of the attention, but there's all sorts of other amazing beneficial insects that do amazing things for the ecosystem and for us, and I think it's important to talk about them too. And then I want to talk a little bit about creating habitat for pollinators, and then talk about the pesticide risks to pollinators and a few ecologically responsible solutions. So first, to kind of set the stage for this talk, why are we so concerned with conserving pollinators and other insects? What's the big deal? And the answer is they do so much for ecosystems and also for us. They recycle nutrients through the ecosystem. There was a study I saw recently that was in Massachusetts where they found ants moved, it was 30 tons of soil per acre per year, which is really an astounding amount of soil movement. They also offer free pest control services. They do an incredible job keeping pest insects in check in our home gardens, in agricultural areas, as well as in wildland areas. I think an area that people don't really think of is how important they are as food for other organisms. A fact I'd like to share is that chickadees need to eat about 10,000 caterpillars to fledge a nest, and that takes place in about 3 weeks. So that's about 450 caterpillars a day that these chickadees are eating, which is really astounding. And the reason for this is they're incredibly nutritious. There's a lot of protein in insects, and pound per pound, they have over twice the amount of protein that beef does. So they're really these nutrient bombs. And then finally, they help plants reproduce. They're pollinators, insects. They keep our flowering plants that we love around, and then the seeds and the fruits and the nuts that result from pollination are food for other creatures. And of course, that includes us. So this is from a project we did with Whole Foods a few years ago. This is a normal supermarket produce area with all of the great foods that we enjoy. And then this is what that would look like if there were no pollinators. And you can see that difference is incredibly stark. So they're super important. So I want to talk about a few of the main groups of pollinators. We have butterflies and moths. We have flies like that syrphid fly, which is the purple one. It's kind of the mimic on the middle upper one. We have wasps, we have beetles, hummingbirds. There's all sorts of creatures that visit flowers, usually for their sugary nectar and end up pollinating them. You'll note I didn't have bees on the last slide. Bees are our most important pollinator, as I'm sure many of you know, so they get their own slide. We have an amazing diversity of bees. In the Pacific Northwest area, there's an estimated 800 bee species native to our region. And then in the United States, there's just under 4,000 different species that are native to the United States. And some of them might not look like what you think of when you think of a bee. Some of them are really tiny, about the size of a grain of rice. And the other ones are really big, bumblebees and carpenter bees. Some of them are really, I mean, I think they're all pretty. I really like the metallic green sweat bee, that agapostumum on the bottom middle. There's huge diversity in bees, which are really cool. I want to touch really quickly on social versus solitary bees. Over 90% of our native bees are solitary. That means each female bee, she hatches, she mates, so she flies around, collects all the pollen and nectar or I should say the pollen for her offspring. She digs her own little nest. She's doing all of the hard work herself. And about 70% of our native bees are ground nesting bees, so they nest in little tunnels in the ground. And the other 30% are cavity nesting. They nest in hollow plant stems and tunnels, little cracks in walls, or I should say like stone walls, places like that. Bumblebees are our only native bees that are social, meaning they have a queen and workers. This is an image of a bumblebee nest right there. They're a lot smaller than honeybee nests, and they're not as long-lived. They die off at the end of the summer. But you will see a lot of bumblebees flying around. Most of the ones you'll see are the workers. And I do want to quickly touch on honeybees. I'm not addressing honeybees really in this talk because you can kind of think of them as livestock because they're managed species that are from Europe. But a lot of the things we're talking about today to conserve our native pollinators will also benefit honeybees as well. I also quickly want to touch on beneficial insects. You'll hear that term a lot, beneficial insects. And pollinators are one beneficial insect. But another group of beneficial insects are natural enemies. So these are the predators and parasitoids that eat our pest insects and help keep them in check. You're likely familiar with insects like lady beetles or lacewings, dragonflies. Those are all great predators. And then parasitoids are insects that actually lay their eggs on or inside a host insect. And then when the larva hatches, it kind of eats its way out. It's kind of like alien. But it's very cool and they help keep pest populations in check. And there's also non-insects like spiders, harlequins, centipedes, mites as well. So as I'm sure some of you in this room are familiar with, there's more and more studies coming out that are documenting large-scale declines in pollinators and other insect species. And the data is a little bit patchy because many insects, in fact, most insects aren't carefully monitored. There's just too many of them, and we don't have a lot of funding to do a lot of monitoring. But the data that we do have almost all points to declines in populations and insect communities around the world. And we know enough to know that it's essential to take action to protect these species. And there's several different reasons for these insect declines. The big ones that scientists agree on are habitat loss and fragmentation, climate change, as well as pesticides. So despite the doom and gloom of insect declines, I do want to stress that our yards, our parks, the places where we live and work in our towns and cities really can support really surprisingly abundant and diverse pollinator and other insect communities. And the big reason for that is because we provide flowers through the spring into fall in our yards and our parks. And these are the resources that pollinators and other insects need. There's also been studies that suggest that our yards and parks, the places where we live, have lower pesticide exposure rates than surrounding agricultural areas. So our yards can actually serve as refuges for these pollinators. So something that's really exciting to me, because I work in these areas a lot, is that our yards, our parks really do have high conservation potential for pollinators. But we have to manage them properly to get the maximum value out of them. So what are the habitat needs for pollinators? So there's three basic needs that pollinators and all insects really need. And they're food, shelter, and then refuge from pesticides. So for bees, food are the nectar and pollen that they eat. When we think of other pollinators, like butterflies, they'll need larval host plants to nibble on and develop. And then shelter is old stems, leaf litter, snags, stumps, things like that, where insects can kind of hide and shelter in. So that's the basis of this pyramid for insect conservation. You need habitat, and then you need to keep that habitat healthy by protecting it from pesticides. So let's talk first about providing habitat. So when we're selecting habitat plants, we really recommend people prioritize native plants because they're going to provide the best resources for our native bees and butterflies and other insects. It's also really important to plant a diversity of plants. You want different sizes, different colors, different textures. This is what's going to create complex habitat in your yard and better support diverse populations of insects. One of the things that's really important too when you're thinking about diversity is to have something blooming in your yard all season long, from spring all the way into fall. The reason for this is because different bees and other insects emerge at different times of year, and lots of times they're only out being active for a couple weeks. So if a bee emerges, it comes out of its little hole in the ground where it's been overwintering, and there's nothing blooming for it to feed on. Your yard isn't providing the resources that that population needs to thrive. And then, of course, it's also important to select plants that are suitable for your site, soil, sun, moisture, things like that. And I didn't end up grabbing them. I left them by the front door. I had a bunch of these handouts to bring you, but they're available on our Xerces library online. We have a lot of great suggested pollinator planting lists. I think each list has about 50 plants. The Maritime Northwest one covers our region, but it has a lot of great suggestions for suggested pollinator planting lists. Whether they grow in full sun, part sun, whether they support Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths, as well as bees. So I really encourage you to go check out some of our Xerces planting lists. One of the other considerations with plant selection is that we recommend people avoiding cultivated plants, especially ornamental plants that are bred for traits like double petals, for example, because often that eliminates the pollen and nectar resource inside the flower, or just physically excludes, or makes, I should say, a physical exclusion so the bee can't even access the pollen and nectar. One of the other things too with cultivated plants is that bees, and I think this should work. Yes, they see in UV light. So there's a lot of things that bees are seeing on a flower that we don't see. And often there's guides that help guide the bee in to identify a flower and show them where to go. So you can kind of see with this flower here, there's that kind of darker patch that's there to kind of guide a bee in. So if we breed a plant for something that's aesthetic to us, a different color, a different shape, sometimes those markings can also be lost. And now I'm poetic, I can go that way. There we go. One of the other things too, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is to try to find plants that haven't been treated with pesticides during propagation, because then you're not bringing back plants that can expose the insects in your yard to harmful pesticides. So I think planting for pollinators gets a decent amount of attention in conservation circles, but I don't hear quite as much usually about providing shelter. And providing shelter is really important. It's actually one of the most important things that influences populations of bees and other insects year to year. And in your yard, shelter is things like stems, it's brush piles, it's a pile of rocks, it's a stump, it's leaf litter, some of these things that are pictured here on this slide. As I mentioned, 70% of our native bees nest in the ground, so keeping a little bit of bare soil where some bees can dig their little nests is a great way to provide habitat for ground nesting bees. There's been studies that show that even though 70% of our ground nesting, or 70% of our native bees are ground nesting, you find a much lower proportion of them in our urban areas, mostly because our urban areas tend to be paved. There's asphalt, there's roads, there's places like lawns where bees can't really get in and dig a hole. We like to plant everything and mulch everything. We don't have that much bare soil in our yards and parks. So that's a great way to provide habitat as well. You might ask where insects are overwintering, and the answer is that most of them are actually right where they spend all summer. They're just more hidden and less obvious. A lot of them hide under leaf litter, under places like old decaying pieces of wood, all sorts of places where they can be insulated and sheltered from the elements. So this is a morning cloak butterfly, and it actually overwinters as an adult under leaf litter. So it's one of the first butterflies to emerge in the spring because it's ready to go. It's already pupated and it's an adult, but it relies on that layer of leaves to kind of shelter it and protect it over winter. So leaving the leaves doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice your yard to the wilderness. You don't have to leave the leaves exactly where they fell. You can rake them or blow them into garden beds, around tree wells, places like that. You don't want to shred them because you don't want to shred up the insect eggs and larvae and pupa that might be overwintering under those leaves. But you can move them around. You can use an electric leaf blower or a rake. And yeah, I said avoid shredding the leaves, and if you do feel like you need to clean up the leaves later in the spring, try to wait as long as possible. Sometimes people have a guideline of when it's a certain degree outside, but ultimately there's insects that are using these leaves constantly, so waiting as long as possible, or ideally just having an area that you let the leaves kind of take over is a great way to provide habitat. And in this slide, I just have some examples of different insects that are using the leaves here. Bumblebee queens, they really use these leaves to overwinter, which is really important. All sorts of different caterpillars, cocoons, fireflies hunt underneath the leaf litter. And we do have fireflies here, they're just not the type that glow. And then brown beetles and birds also forage as well. So these are all things that are living in the leaves over winter. One of the other important things that we like to say is to save the stems. So the other 30% of bees nest in cavities, and some of them nest in old hollow plant stems. It's a perfect habitat for them. They'll chew the little pithy area out and then build their nests. And you can see that cross section there. It shows a cross section of a bee nest in a stem, and you can see the larva and the pollen. And I think there's a pupa on top there as well. So I think it's really fascinating how they do this, and they'll just fill the whole stem up with their offspring. And what you want to do is if you have a plant that you want to provide nesting resources for bees, you should leave that plant up untouched the first winter. Things like birds will use the seeds or fruit, and then that spring you want to cut it back. And I'd err on the side of cutting high just to make sure you have enough space inside that stem for bees to actually create a nest in. And then they'll use that second year growth or it's not growth, sorry, that second year stem that's dead to build their nests in. And then you want to keep it another winter until the following spring and summer when the bees that nested in there will emerge. And by that point, the stems generally kind of decompose on their own, but you could also cut them back at that point. So yeah, saving the stems, a great way to provide habitat in your yard. Okay, so now I want to touch a little bit about pesticides. Always an exciting topic. Yeah, that's a good reaction. So pesticides, I want to give a quick primer on some of the issues associated with pesticides. Pesticide is an umbrella term. It refers to a bunch of different, as we say, sides, but insecticides are what we're generally most concerned with because they're designed to kill insects. But then there's also herbicides, which are designed to kill plants, and then fungicides, which are designed to kill mildews and fungi, which also can be concerning in different ways. And I should say before I move on to that, insecticides are what we're most concerned with, and the issue with insecticides is that no matter what type of insecticide we're talking about, whether it's an organic one or a really highly toxic conventional insecticide, ultimately they're all designed to kill insects. So they generally, I won't say it's a blanket statement because there are some that are more targeted than others in the groups of insects that impact, but oftentimes what you can go buy at the store tend to be very broad spectrum. They'll kill the target pest, but also everything else in your yard. And newer insecticides, you may have heard of neonics or neonicotinoids that have been made to replace older chemicals, aren't actually safer for bees and in some ways are more concerning. And I should also note too that one of the other things associated with pesticide use is that it just treats the symptom, the pest outbreak itself, not the cause of the outbreak. So one of the things we like saying is it's kind of like wearing glasses when really you need to stop staring at computer screens. Or sorry, without my notes, I messed up that. It's like taking Advil for a headache when really you need new glasses or to stop staring at computer screens. So just trying to highlight that it's a symptom of the issue, not it won't solve the issue itself. So I wanted to spend a slide on pesticide oversight and why just following the label on a bottle of pesticides isn't enough to protect pollinators. Really well-intentioned home gardeners might think that if you follow this label, it's going to be sufficient, but there's ways that that's not the case. Federal pesticide regulation both accepts and expects there to be risk to wildlife. They just say there should be, quote, no unreasonable adverse effects. But that's really open to interpretation. They just believe that the benefits that are provided by the pesticides outweigh the harm that they cause. So in a home yard, in a park, those are places where if we're trying to provide a haven for insects and to recover pollinator species, that standard isn't enough, which is why we encourage people to go a little bit deeper and find ways to truly protect these species. And I noted that we're also concerned with fungicides and herbicides in some contexts. I just wanted to spend a slide on that. Fungicides are often classified as practically non-toxic, but there have been some fungicides that have been linked with direct impacts to bees. Symptoms resembling malnutrition, for example, were found after honeybees were exposed to certain fungicides. And there's other fungicides that actually interact synergistically with insecticides, which means they increase the toxicity of that insecticide when they're found together. And often when we're doing sampling of pesticides, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a few slides, we're finding all sorts of pesticides out in our natural areas, in our yards, in our water. So these mixtures are very common. And then herbicides, the main impact is simply that they eliminate flowers from the landscape, which of course are what bees and other pollinators rely on for food. But there's also studies that suggest that certain herbicides like glyphosate might actually impact bees' navigation and also potentially interfere with their gut microbiomes and make them more susceptible to disease. So there are also some direct impacts as well. So I want to give a quick plug about a study that we actually did in 2022, but it was a long road and it's finally published as of last month, where we do a lot of work, or I should say I do a lot of work, but parts of it, some of us at Xerces do a lot of work in home yards, with residents, with communities, trying to increase pollinator gardening and conservation. But unfortunately, the risks of pesticides to pollinators and other insects in urban areas isn't something that's been super well studied. So we've done a series of pesticide sampling studies to try to get a better sense of what some of these risks that pollinators are facing in urban areas and what we can do to try to better address those. So what we did was we sampled 336 butterfly host plants in urban parks in Sacramento in California, and then also in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we sampled leaves, we sent them off to a lab where they screened them for 94 different pesticide compounds. For plant selection, we were looking for Lepidoptera host plants. So these are plants that butterflies and moths feed on to develop. And we used iNaturalist to look for the host plant populations within the cities, and then went and ground truth them on the ground, and then sampled them. And as a quick aside, it was really interesting. It was quite hard to actually find good populations of butterfly host plants in the two cities that we were sampling in. It was really easy to find green space, but lots of times that green space was just turf, some arborvitae, some hydrangeas, things that weren't really providing resources for insects. So just kind of a reminder that often green space doesn't necessarily mean good habitat. So what we found across these 336 butterfly host plants were that 93% of our samples were contaminated with pesticides. And these were in parks, natural areas, and then also private yards and gardens that the people who use them said they don't use pesticides on. So we weren't trying to find areas that would be, we knew were super contaminated. We found 47 different pesticide compounds, and we found an average of 3 pesticides per plant. that was contaminated with with a maximum of 18 different pesticides on a single plant. So we know that there's this background contamination in all sorts of landscapes, but in our urban landscapes, pesticides are frequently found contaminating pollinator plants. I just mentioned the study we just conducted, but we did a different one looking at pesticides on milkweed up and down the Central Valley of California. And in that study, we found an average of 9 pesticides per milkweed plant that we sampled. And then there's also lots of pesticides in our urban waterways. The USGS does pesticide sampling. I have this in my notes, so I'm not going to make up statistics, but it was close to, I think, 90% of the streams that they sampled in urban areas were contaminated with levels of pesticides that would be concerning to aquatic life. And in agricultural areas, that actually was 60%. So in some of these urban areas, they were finding a higher, more concerning levels of pesticides. And there was a study looking at urban streams in King County up in Washington, where they found an average of 37 different pesticides in their stream samples. So there's pesticides that are in our urban environments that are at levels that can impact pollinators and other insects. And I want to note too that even really low background levels can cause issues. We call these sublethal effects, but these are doses that are less than lethal, but they might not kill an individual insect, but they might make them sick. It might make them less efficient when they're gathering food for their offspring. It might reduce wing size. One of the things we were able to link our study to was one of the compounds that we found pretty commonly. It's linked to decreased wing size in monarch butterflies. So while this isn't something that would kill an individual monarch, especially for a species that's migratory, you can imagine that having smaller wings is going to impact their abilities to disperse, to migrate, things like that. So these are all things that might not kill the individual, but can add up over time at the population level. So despite that doom and gloom, I do want to stress that we can all be part of the solution. There's a lot of ways that we can address pesticide use at home, as well as in our communities, and I'll talk through some of those things right now. So I think it's important to stress when we're thinking about pests, when we're thinking about using pesticides, that 98% of insects aren't what we would consider pests. And are actively beneficial to us or to ecosystems. Only about 2% of insects are pests that cause economic damages or vector disease, things like that. But as Rachel Carson said, yet most of the chemicals now used kill all insects, our friends and our enemies alike. So when we think about pesticide use, one of the challenges with addressing it, especially in our urban areas, in our towns and cities, is that it's invisible. It's really hard to see. And it crops up in places that we might not think. I think it's easy to think, oh yes, if I stop going out and spraying this plant with pesticides, I'm reducing pesticide use, which is very true and is great. But there's other places that pesticides kind of crop up that you might not think. And one of these is foundation treatments to control nuisance spiders and ants, or structural pests like termites or carpenter ants. In that study I mentioned where we sampled milkweed in the Central Valley of California, we found really concerning levels of a pesticide that's commonly used to treat structural pests in a milkweed plant that was planted in a monarch garden outside of this house. And it turns out that the person who owned the house, who created this great pollinator garden in her yard, had purchased the house 6 years before, had never used pesticides, but before the house was sold, it was treated for termites or carpenter ants. And ever since then, that area where they put the pesticide in the trench had been a source of exposure ever since. So this is just an example of a place where you might not think of, but having plants placed around houses that have been treated for pests could be a source of pesticide exposure. Another one is trees. Insecticide use and fungicide use in trees is very common. You might have a tree that looks sick, so you call an arborist, and they might treat the tree with a systemic fungicide or insecticide. And systemic means that the pesticide is uptaken by the tree and it makes the entire thing toxic. So the woody part, the leaves, the flower, and nectar as well. And one of the issues with pesticide use in trees is they can last a really long time in woody plants because they're not exposed to the environment, they're not exposed to wind, rain, water, things that normally would break down pesticides. So there have been studies that have found that blossoms and leaves can be contaminated for months to years after some of these applications. And I want to caution that I'm not saying to never treat a tree, but to think about whether this will be a one-time application, whether it's something that will require ongoing applications, if it's a really high-value tree that you really want to save, or if it's already kind of sick, or you have other trees that are kind of also either providing shade or filling that ecological niche. So just kind of thinking about that trade-off of pesticide use versus saving the tree. And then we touched on this a little bit earlier, but one other surprise source of pesticides in the home yard that's kind of a hidden risk are plants from nurseries. The consumer demand for really pretty plants that are damage-free and insect-free, along with interstate rules that are designed to prevent pest spread, means that there's really high use of pesticides in nursery production. And there's been studies that have found really high levels of pesticides in plants on nursery shelves, including a different study that we did at Xerces where we sampled milkweed at retail nurseries in, I believe it was 15 different states. And we found I'm trying to remember what the exact number was, but it was approaching 10, I think on average, pesticides per milkweed plant on the shelf of these nurseries, including plants that were labeled bee friendly and we don't spray neonics. So that's obviously concerning. So we have some resources, and I believe you all actually have them back there. I saw a stack of Buying Bee Safe plants. So you can check it out there, or you can check it out on our website. But we have some guidelines of questions you can ask your nursery or native, or I should say your plant grower. Ask for organic plants that haven't been treated with these systemic, really long-lived insecticides, and just try to get to know your nursery's production. Often a nursery won't know because they've purchased the plants from a grower, but we're hoping that more people asking these questions will have show consumer demand for these bee safe plants. And if you are worried that a plant that you purchased has been contaminated with pesticides, there are things you can do. You can try to knock as much of the soil off as possible before you plant it, so that if that soil was treated with a pesticide, the plant will continue to uptake it. And you can also net the plant with a fine mesh for the first year, because even if it's toxic, those pesticides will break down, and in subsequent years it shouldn't be an issue. But something else you can do is go to native plant sales. You can trade seeds and plant starts with friends and neighbors. Those are great ways that you can exchange native plants without risking pesticide contamination. So as far this could be an entirely different talk by itself. As far as addressing pesticide use in the home garden. But our ultimate goal is to try to get people to avoid pesticide use if possible in the home yard. And that I can appreciate takes time to build up kind of the knowledge and other solutions. So we don't expect people to kind of go cold turkey with this, but eventually in home yards, and we also work a lot in parks and work with various parks departments and people in campuses all across the country. In these urban areas, we really are trying to avoid pesticide use whenever possible. And one of those things that you can do is try to manage your yard to prevent pests. And I have a slide where we'll talk about that a little bit, but prevention is kind of the base of this kind of pesticide avoidance goal. But if pests do pop up, one of the things to do is just to confirm the pest truly is a problem. Oftentimes, as I was mentioning, 98% of insects aren't pests. It's something that isn't actually an issue or can be kept in check by the natural enemies that are around. And once you confirm that it is a problem, try to consider using, some of those non-chemical management practices before considering pesticides. So when it comes to prevention to avoid pesticide use, it's really important to kind of build a good foundation in your yard. You've, I'm sure, heard this term before, but one of the things we like to say is right plant, right place. So this means just planting plants that fit the condition of your yard. So if you plant a drought tolerant plant, or I should say a shade tolerant plant in a really sunny area, it's probably just going to spend most of its resources trying to survive and not have enough resources to fight off plant infection or infestation. It's also important to water appropriately, not too much, not too little. The best option for garden irrigation is soaker hoses or something that will really saturate the ground. You don't want to do the overhead sprinklers because those only tend to water the top inch or two of soil. And what you want to do is try to promote deep root growth so that your plants are more resistant to drought stress later in the year. And if you're using native plants after the first year or so, they really shouldn't need any supplemental irrigation. Another thing is to build healthy soils. Obviously, if you're gardening with native plants versus more conventional gardening plants or doing vegetable gardening, what that looks like might be different. But there are labs that can give you inexpensive soil tests that will tell you what your soil has. And it will let you try to match up the plants with your soil type or understand if you even need to fertilize at all. And then finally, simply don't crowd plants. Give them enough airflow and sunlight so that they're more resistant to things like powdery mildew. Even though these are all fairly simple gardening tips, they all relate to pest prevention because stressed plants simply have a much harder time mustering their own natural defenses against insects and pathogens. So when it comes to alternatives, we really love to recommend just building up that diversity of native plants in your yard, both because it's going to be great for pollinators, but then also it's going to be great for beneficial predators and parasitoids as well. And these are, again, really important for trying to suppress pests in your yard. They are very sensitive generally to pesticides. And one of the things that can happen is if you use pesticides, not only will they kill the pest, but they'll also kill the beneficial insects. And when the pests come back, often their populations will really explode because there's no natural enemies that are helping keep those populations in check. So the key really is plant diversity. I know I keep saying that, but that's really what will support the most diverse and functional insect population in your yard. Studies have shown that diverse native plants support way more insects as well as other organisms like songbirds than lawns do. And I'm going to use lawns as an example here. They're kind of a monoculture. Pests thrive in them. There's generally higher rates of pesticides applied as well. And this kind of represents a food web of insects that would be living in a lawn. You can see it's kind of this monocrop. So there's only a few insects using it as a resource. And further up that food chain, there's not that many insects. And we have over 40 million acres of lawn in the US, which is really astounding. And this is a food chain that's supported by this diverse planting. And you can see there's many more insects that are using that garden as a resource. And then as you go further up the food chain, it's supporting more other insects as well as things like songbirds as well. So I kind of jumped ahead and I talked about this a few slides ago, talking about pesticide use. But if pesticides are part of your management, garden management, we definitely encourage you to use the least toxic pesticide that you can find in the most targeted application possible, because that'll minimize the risks to non-target insects. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email us. We're happy to answer questions and provide information on the toxicity of different pesticides. We can look things up. We love to answer questions, so feel free to reach out. And then I think if there's one main takeaway from this talk that I really would love to kind of impress on you is that, embracing a little bit of damage to your yard is a great thing. It means that your yard is being used as a resource by all these amazing insects. And sometimes what looks like damage is actually beneficial insects. So this is a really great example that I've seen in my yard before. These little circular discs cut out of the margin of this leaf aren't from an herbivore. It's actually from a leafcutter bee, which is a type of native pollinator that cuts little discs and brings those discs of either leaves or petals back to its nest to line the inside of its nest with. So if you see those little circular discs cut out of a leaf, it's probably being used by a leafcutter bee. So we like to say, you need plants being fed on by caterpillars to end up having butterflies. Embracing some level of damage in your yard, it can be a really wonderful thing. And I want to kind of end here by just stressing that we really do have the potential to create amazing habitat in our yards and in parks and communities, even at the single site level. Research has shown that even a single yard can make a huge difference to pollinators and support an amazing diversity of pollinators. But the more people, if you talk to your neighbors, if you talk to your friends, the more people on a block or in a neighborhood who are all gardening for wildlife, the conservation potential really just increases. It scales up. You're providing more connected habitat across the landscape, and it can be a really wonderful thing. But of course, too, I have to add, I'm on the pesticide team. An important part of that is protecting these spaces from pesticides as well. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of resources that are related to this on our website, so I encourage you to go check those out. There's a search bar, you can search by what type of organism, topic like pesticides, endangered species, and you can find some relevant resources. And then with that, I think I probably have a little bit of time for questions. And I have my email right there. And then I also have our general pesticides@xerces.org email. And if you have any questions moving forward, feel free to send us an email. We'd be happy to get back to you.
I'm gonna jump in really quickly to first and to say, first of all, thank you. This is wonderful. We do have plenty of time for questions. Also, since you mentioned not having the one handout, with your library account, you do get $3 worth of free printing per week here. We do have a color printer as well. So with that $3, you would be able to print 6 color pages per week. So you can print out all these fine publications from the website. So just a little plug there.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Questions. Thank you, first of all. Okay, so I'm cool with all the invertebrates, but I'm a little bit racist against slugs. Why would I want to embrace the slugs? And also, is iron phosphate okay to use on them?
That's a good question. I mean, so yeah, so there's obviously always pest insects that people are not fans of. So my argument for slugs would just be, hey, they're part of the ecosystem. You know, they're food for other things. They're, you know, kind of decomposing there. But I totally get it. You don't want slugs eating your plants. And you know, obviously people have similar opinions about things like yellow jackets, and yeah, so I totally get it. How are you applying the iron phosphate?
I'm just sprinkling it here and there.
Just like throughout the garden. It's probably not the most high risk thing because you're just doing it on the ground. I think, you know, there would be other soil invertebrates that potentially would be at risk. But if you're just sprinkling it here and there where you know the slugs are, it's probably not the most high risk thing. But I could do a little more digging if you want me to. If you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to.
Okay for other, you know, species and birds and things. So I just wanted to, it's all right, soil and for other.
Yeah, I would say for other invertebrates, there's probably some level of risk. Yeah, because it's not going to be targeted to just slugs. But as far as what those risks are, I don't know off the top of my head. So if you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to dig in and do a little bit more of a literature search for you. Yeah.
I don't know how we can become a bee city.
Oh, how to become a bee city?
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so part of I should have had a slide on that. Thank you. So one of the arms of Xerces is Bee City and Bee Campus USA, where affiliates make 4 pledges, I believe, or commitments. It's to provide pollinator habitat, to reduce pesticide use, to do outreach and education. There's a 4th one, I think. Or maybe there's only 3. Anyway, to do that, and then there has to be buy-in from the government itself. So you have to have a Bee City steering committee that has community member volunteers as well as somebody from the city, and they have to. And that's what the 4th thing is. Sorry, it's to some way in the city, whether it's the city's charter or you know, in some way formally acknowledge that your city is a bee city. And the process is pretty easy. You just have to kind of get people on board. And again, if you send me an email, I can link you up with our Bee City USA coordinator who is happy to answer all of these questions. And I'm sure we'd be super excited if you were interested in becoming a bee city. Definitely, yeah.
Cities in this area?
What was that?
Are there any bee cities in this
You
area?
know, off the top of my head, I'm not sure if there's any in the gorge. There's a lot in the kind of Portland metro area. I would say Vancouver is, yeah, in the Portland metro area there is, but I'm not sure in the gorge. But yeah, up and down, kind of, yeah, Vancouver is. like Wilsonville, Oregon City. Anyway, yeah, there's a handful around. Yeah. But it's a really great program that I really appreciate because these cities end up doing so much wonderful outreach work. So one of the pledges is they reduce pesticide use as a city. So they have to have an integrated pest management plan for their parks department, for example, which is really impactful. But they also tend to do lots of outreach events and talk to community members and educate them on how they can, provide habitat for pollinators. So they end up doing these really great community initiatives in bee cities. And I believe we have at this point, if you combine bee cities and bee campuses, I think we have over 400 across the country. So the program's really taken off, which is cool. Yeah. Yeah.
First, appreciate you're actually going out and testing things.
Yeah.
Plants. Another question in that direction.
Yeah.
Unintended consequences. Golson's book.
Yeah.
Read that, and the neonic that he found, remember, specific for veterinary use, and it apparently become an aquatic contaminant from dogs. And I wonder if anyone, maybe Xerces, would look at potential throughput of the neonics in dog poop and pee.
That's a really good question. And I
Googled it. I can't find that where anyone's ever.
I have gotten a question about that once. I think it was a couple of years ago, and I too couldn't really find much information on what the potential impact of pesticide use on pets is on. No, it's a great question because there are all sorts of both neonics and pyrethroids that are being used on pets, dogs, and
they're out a lot technical areas.
Yeah, and especially with neonics, I mean, such small quantities are lethal to pollinators. Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know of any studies off the top of my head that have looked at that. But it's something, maybe if we get funding someday down the road, it could be fun to look at that. Yeah.
I was gonna ask, I won't ask how much that one study cost with the the LC.
Yeah, the big yeah. So that, and then we also just recently did one looking at mosquito sprays. I didn't include that because it was kind of short on time, and it's a little bit. Mosquito sprays obviously happen here too, but I do a remote webinar to the southeast, for example. Always include that because it's so common. We looked at residues from mosquito sprays, both in yards sprayed for mosquitoes as well as in neighboring yards to see how much drifted. And sorry, I'm digressing, but we did GCMS and LCMS, so that one was even more expensive. But even with the research rate, it was like $130 a sample. So then you start looking at how many samples you can actually do, and
research rate, so you get a tiny discount.
You get a little bit of a discount, yeah, exactly. Or not a for profit, yeah.
You said 40 million acres of lawn in the US. What, did you say that was the largest use of water or pesticides?
Water, I believe. It's the largest irrigated, if you consider it like a crop, it's like the largest irrigated crop. Yeah.
People have herbaceous perennials in their garden, and you talked about a cycle of being able to allow for remain stems.
Yeah.
So I've always been heading those to the ground, but I'm curious, if you had herbaceous perennials, how do you suggest you manage those for maximum habitat?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I have some herbaceous perennials in the front yard. They're all native ones, but the same principle can apply. But so I have Douglas aster and some goldenrod. And what I do this time of year, and again, this is if it fits your aesthetic in your garden. I understand there's different people have different priorities. But right now I'm just leaving the plants as is. And it's been really fun because there's been flocks of bush tits coming through and eating the seeds. So they're being used as resources by birds mainly right now, which is very neat. But then what I'll do is later this winter, I'll probably cut them down to about 12 inches tall. Maybe some a little higher, some a little lower, but around at least 12 inches so that there's enough room for a bee to use it. So then those freshly cut stems from last year's growth, bees that emerged this spring and summer will then use those as a nesting resource. So they'll chew out the pith, lay their nests or their eggs in it, build their nest over the course of the summer. So then you want to leave, and then what ends up happening is the new growth comes up and then you don't even see the old stems anymore. They're covered by the new growth. And then you want to leave those ones that you cut up another winter, because then those bees, the eggs and larvae are overwintering inside, and then the following spring and summer they'll emerge. So it's kind of like a 2-year cycle, if that makes sense. And then you can either cut them down, or what I find is they're already kind of breaking down. So just kind of get let nature take its course. So yeah, it's the leave them intact, and you could cut them back now. That's fine too. I just prefer to leave them up so that birds can use the seeds and things as a resource. But yeah, cut them back and then leave them up that whole growing season, winter into the following year. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Yeah.
Great idea. We grow a lot of brassicas and they are excellent aphid habitat.
Yeah.
And wonder how you feel about neem oil, or if you have some other ways to reduce.
That's a great question. What I've done with aphids, and I admit that this is different because since I've moved back to Portland, I haven't been doing much food gardening. It's mostly just habitat gardening. But on one of my rose plants, it was totally covered in aphids. And the nice thing about aphids is they are easy to knock to the ground. If you jet them with a hose, it'll knock them off. And they either won't be able to climb back up, or they'll use so much energy climbing back up that they, won't be very effective. So just jetting them with a hose can be a really good strategy. If that's not solving it, obviously, brassicas often are close to the ground, and there's lots of aphids hiding in places that you can't spray with a hose. Neem oil is an option, but is less toxic than a lot of conventional pesticides. But I will caution that the active ingredient in neem oil, azadirachtin, is an insect growth regulator, which means it prevents immature insects from being able to finish development. And it is toxic to all sorts of insects. So one of the things that and it is systemic, which means it can be uptaken by the plant and expressed in other places. So if you did use neem oil on like a brassica, I would just caution to not do it when the plant was flowering, or if it was bolting and flowering at all, because then pollinators could potentially be exposed. And then also, just trying to make sure it's targeted. You're not getting it on something that might be a butterfly host plant, because one of the things that I do, that comes up a lot is people are like, oh, I just use neem oil. Make sure I won't do it when it's flowering. But they might be using it on a plant that is being used by caterpillars. And, since it is an insect growth regulator, you want to make sure you're not. Yeah. So certainly something that can be used, but you just kind of want to make sure you're checking those boxes to reduce the potential non-target risks, if that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always getting mailings saying save the bees, petition bear. And I'm thinking it probably doesn't do any good. So what is the more effective way, or is there an effective way of getting bear to change its plans?
That's a really good question. And we do have a couple people on the pesticides team whose entire job is pesticide policy. So that's a great question and I'd be happy if you wanted to email us to pass it along. I think that I would agree with you that just trying to petition bear is not gonna solve our problems. We've been doing a lot of work both at local, state, and then occasionally also at the federal level, looking at restrictions on pesticide use. And I think a lot of that's the direction where I think we might be able to have more of an impact. So there was one in Vermont recently where we got a lot of restrictions. Well, when I say we, the coalition of other groups we were working with, at the state level, restrictions on the use of neonicotinoid seed. I didn't touch on that in this talk because it's not to an ag focused audience, but many different seeds you can buy or farmers use are coated in neonicotinoids. As I've mentioned, these are really, really toxic insecticides, and they're just put on as a seed coating that's preventative, just so that something when you plant the seed doesn't eat it. Even though there have been studies that show the germination rate between treated seeds and non-treated seeds isn't really that different, but people just use it as kind of an insurance. And they're really toxic. They're really toxic to songbirds, actually. One neonic treated seed is enough to kill a songbird, and often they'll snack on a seed that's been planted in the field. Anyway, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but we did win in Vermont restrictions on the use of treated seed. So there's different places, I think, legislatively where I think more of those changes are going to be effective.
Where I'm going
Yeah.
at is, how do you, if Rachel Carson writes Silent Spring,
Yeah,
and there's a massive outpouring by the public, then you get some change.
yeah,
And do we have something that's happening like that? Robert F. Kennedy, I'm a doctor.
okay, yeah.
So, I'm watching Bobby Kennedy transform the health, make America healthy again.
Yeah.
And I followed him for 25 years when he cleaned up the Hudson River.
Right.
And he sued some of the big guys.
Yeah.
Now he is in a position where he's actually making change. And I'm thinking, how do we get enough oomph politically?
No, it's a really good question, and I think
Get it
you,
changed.
we're doing our best trying to do outreach and through initiatives like Bee City and we have Xerces ambassadors going out to spread the word to try and. But I agree with you. It would be great if there was even more of a groundswelling. But we're as far as Xerces is concerned, we're doing our best to try to share this information with people, talk about the importance of pollinators, get people concerned about the declines in pollinators and other insects and why it's important. I think it's a great question though. How do you kind of break through that? I don't know what you want to call it to really get that critical upswell.
They are pushing now regenerative agriculture. There is a cooperation with the Department of Agriculture, which is frankly amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have heard a bit about the regenerative, agriculture stuff that's going on, which is cool. Yeah.
How did you do? You guys did the BLM thing with the spraying for Mormon crickets.
Yeah.
Were you in a coalition? Did you actually sue the coalition?
Yeah, my colleague Sharon Salvaggio, that's her project that she's been working on. And there was a lawsuit suing the USDA APHIS and trying to get them to change their so
that was huge.
That was huge, and then halted spraying across all of these acres of BLM land from people who aren't familiar with the and it was a really great success. So also using the courts when necessary. It's not something that we do a lot, but when we sign on with other organizations in the coalition, sometimes it's a tool. But it's kind of different. It's like how do you do legislative things as well as how do you get that upswelling of kind of community support that can make change on the ground.
On that, do you work with Earth Justice, whose tagline is "The Earth needs a good lawyer"?
I believe that Earth Justice was. I wasn't involved personally on that one, but I believe that Earth Justice is involved. Yeah.
So I've had mummyberry problems in the past with my blueberries. And so one thing to use is copper sulfate. There's other various fungicide, bactericides. Like the problem I'm now dealing with being systemic. I've got laryngitis, but my concern would be pollinators in the spring into the summer. But what else am I going to deal with that? Because that's something you got to deal with for some couple of years.
Right. How do you apply it?
In the ground.
You're doing it in the ground, so it's
You do that randomly.
Right.
So you have to clear out any detritus that might have fungus or bacteria on the ground, and then apply that. It helped last year, but
I think in our ranking of organic pesticides, some of those copper fungicides we rank as moderately toxic to bees. So it's one of those ones that's not going to be the highest risk. And I think that, if you've tried other things and you haven't had success with them, I totally understand that you want to have your blueberries and not have them be, so I think, there's always trade-offs is I guess what I'm trying to say. So I think I would just encourage, it sounds like I'm sure you've tried other potentially less toxic solutions. And if you have, I think we would just recommend kind of going through, we usually don't use the term integrated pest management framework with, more general audience. We usually use that for like a parks department or something, but it's kind of this IPM framework where you're looking to see, okay, is this issue above a threshold that's concerning to me. And then if it is, trying to find the least toxic ways to deal with it, trying to do things like prevention, just sanitation, removing infected material and infested material. And if that's not solving the issue, then moving on to some of these other, least toxic options. And if those aren't, solving the issue, and you're having success with the copper product, yeah, and if you have, off the top of my head, I know we rank that as moderately toxic. What exactly that means, I don't remember off the top of my head, but if you would like to send me an email, I'd be happy to look up, things like potentially the duration of how long it lasts and might be, risky. And there also are products that don't, they are systemic, and they are expressed in the leaves and the stem, but don't make their way to the pollen and nectar. So there can be a little bit of differentiation between some of these systemic products. Sorry, that was a lot. I don't know if that answer really was helpful, but yeah.
We have a noxious weed infestation
that
we've been dealing with, and we have a noxious weed program here who in the spring came and sprayed. It's for shiny geranium.
Oh yeah.
And they've just offered to come spray again, and I said, go ahead, because it's so pervasive throughout our property. And I'm kind of wondering, is there we want to establish more native plants and stuff, I'm kind of like, okay, we obviously have to deal with this first, but then is there kind of a timeline that I should be working with to then be establishing? Because I'm thinking, well, we'll establish the natives around the edge and then kind of move them in as we've gotten rid of the noxious weeds.
I think that is a good strategy. I think ultimately, we recognize that herbicides are definitely a tool in the toolbox for controlling, especially noxious weed situations. And then also, it also sounds like almost what you're dealing with is, like a site preparation thing, almost, where you're like, oh, this is all just, and using herbicides, really clearing things out so you can, establish good habitat is way better in the long run than, just having this mixture of invasives and natives and you're constantly trying to deal with it. So what I would suggest is, if there are sections that are, shiny geranium and weed free, beginning to, establish native plants in those, because that's going to help outcompete any, native or invasive plants that are beginning to pop back up. Leaving that bare soil for too long, obviously, is just an invitation for more. So I think that if, you have success, and off the top of my head, I don't know, what usually how long it takes to get rid of a shiny geranium infestation. I'm sure it depends on, how many you have
for 40
years. So I would say if you think you might have to herbicide again, you don't want to have those, native plants too close, because obviously drift can happen. So trying to, if you have a section where you're like, hey, this is clear, start to plant those, and then try to work your way through. But I think that obviously, it sounds like you're thinking through the project.
Conflicting emotions around it too.
Totally. I think one of those things that we say is, we if you're going to use herbicides to get, for site preparation or to get rid of a weed or something like that, try as much as possible to make it a one-time thing by doing some of those things, like immediately replanting, trying to then, if you do see, in your clear area, weeds beginning to pop back up, trying to control those right away before they set seed and, become more of an issue. So and then also you can always go for native plants that are a little bit more aggressive that could potentially fill in some of those spaces if you're okay with that. Obviously they can kind of become weedy, but it's a little bit different, I think. And
Time for just another, maybe a couple, 2 more questions, so we'll have a little more time for folks to pick up literature before packing up.
I just had a question on that. You said if you are suspicious that you have a plant that has pesticide residue, you said knock off the soil, and then you said something about netting, and I was curious.
Oh yeah, so one of the things too that you can do if you want is put a fine mesh netting on top of the plant so that pollinators can't visit it. If that makes sense. Yeah. So
like a mosquito net or something?
Well, like a mosquito net, exactly. Yeah. You want something that will exclude most flower
So
disorders.
still lets in light.
But still lets in light and air and water and all of that. Yeah. So, some of the pesticides that are used, especially the more long-lived neonics, they can honestly contaminate a plant for pretty much an entire an herbaceous plant for an entire growing season. So if you net it for that season and then you can remove it, and then the next year the plant should be, there might be trace levels, but it should be a lot lower. Yeah.
Saw a queen bumblebee yesterday.
Did you
Will she
really?
survive?
It's hard to say. Hopefully, yes. Maybe she'll crawl back into a nice little, her nice little hollow rodent hole, wherever it is that she's, yeah. Hopefully. This obviously isn't the first time we've had weird warm weather in the middle of the winter, and yeah, but that's a great question. Yeah, it's definitely, this weather has been weird when it comes to insects and plants, and yeah. So yeah, I would say hopefully, but yeah, I'm guessing she probably is not finding a whole lot to feed on right now, unfortunately. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Appreciate everybody dealing with me being slightly distracted with that.
It's just makes me
Please
go.
go.
There's got it.
Questions?
I got it. Thank you guys for coming out. We really appreciate it.
You like that? Yes. Emily. Meeting next time.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yes. And,
Thank you for having me, I appreciate it.
that was great.
Thanks so much. Yeah, okay.